In today's video, we're going to build a simple camera shake feature that you can trigger when the player takes damage or when we damage enemies, or from any other part in the game where you would like to. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Alright, so in this video we're going to make the camera shake. Simple camera shake feature that is going to have just some functions and parameters on our camera so we can control how that shake works. We'll need a global function that allows us to call and trigger the camera shake from anywhere in the game. And then we want to add this camera shake functionality to our player and enemies when they do or take damage. Okay, so that's kind of where we're going to go. And this tutorial is going to be pretty much code. There's no assets required to make this work. If you're following along and you haven't been following along with the Action RPG tutorial series, then there might be a few things in here that you don't currently have. But this camera shake function itself is very simple, so you should be able to retrofit it to any project with minimal work. All right, so if we look at my game, I'll go over to my player scene here. What we need set up in order for this to work is a camera 2D, and we need to put a script on that. So if you are following along with the Action RPG tutorial series, you should already have this set up, and we already have a script, so I'm going to open this script. But if not, you can create a camera script for your camera, and you can add it. And you don't need any of the other functionality if you are building your own thing. This is just to set up the limits or the bounds for the camera. Okay, so this is not required to make this work. But I'm going to go ahead and in this script, I'm going to add some new variables. So essentially what we want to do is we want to be able to provide a way for you, the developer, to control a little bit about how this camera shake functions. So to be able to control kind of like how much it can shake, how quickly the shake slows down and things like that. So we're going to export a few variables. And the first thing we're going to export a range of 0 to 1. And we're going to snap it at 0.05. And I'm going to add this or greater parameter on here as well, or argument, so that you can manually type in a value greater than 1 if you want to. But by default, that's what I want this to be constrained to. And this is going to be a variable we call shake power. Okay, so 1 being kind of like max and 0 being none. And this is simply something for you to be able to control what this looks like. And by default, I'm going to set it to 0.5. Okay. And then we'll export a second variable. This one will be called the shake max offset. And what this is going to be is, I'm going to set it to 5 by default. This is kind of like the maximum amount of movement the camera can make. And so this is kind of the maximum shake in pixels. Okay. I'll write a little comment about that. Maximum shake in pixels. And then this shake power is going to be kind of like, we'll just say overall strength of shake. And that's going to determine how easy it is to get to this maximum shake, right? And then we're going to export one last variable here, and we'll call it shake decay. And this is another float, and I'm going to set it equal to 1. But this value is how quickly the shake stops or slows down. And it's actually not in seconds, it's kind of like a magnitude. So a larger number is going to slow the shake down more quickly, okay? Because it's a decay, not a time. So by how much does it decay? And then we want another variable here that we're not going to export, and we're going to just call this shake trauma. And this is a float. And by default, we're going to set it to 0. So you're going to see how this works here. We've got these variables, and essentially what we're going to do with our camera is in the physics process, we're going to move the camera if the shake trauma is greater than 0, or we're going to use that shake trauma to shake the camera. And essentially, anytime we shake the camera, we're going to set that shake trauma to a high value, and then it's going to decay based off of our shake decay. And then it's going to use that trauma to do some offset and randomly kind of move the camera around. And we'll use the camera offset to do that. Okay, so that's kind of how those variables work. So let's go down. I mentioned physics process, so let me just add the physics process in here. And for now, I'm just going to say pass. And then I want to make another function right here. I'm going to just call this shake. And it doesn't need to accept any arguments. Okay. And let's go ahead and pass on that one right now. And then we need one other function that we're going to call add camera shake. This is the function that's going to actually kind of start the shake, if you will. And this will require the code to pass in a value. So I'm going to say just value. Okay. And that value is going to be what we add to our shake trauma, essentially. And let's go ahead and just build this function real quick. So this add camera shake function is really simple. And the basic thing that we can do here, and you can change this if you want to make the shake be additive or it can continue to grow or something. But just by default, we're just going to say shake trauma equals value. Okay, that's all we really need to do to make this start to happen. And then within our physics process, let's go ahead and write this out. We're just going to say if shake trauma is greater than 0, then we're going to do some stuff here. Then we're going to shake, shaky shake. Okay. And we're actually going to use this shake function down here to do some of that, although we could just write it all in here, but it's kind of nice to separate some of it out. In addition to shaking, we also need to handle the decay of our shake. Okay, so that the shake will decrease over time. So let's write that piece first. So we'll say shake trauma is equal to, and then we're going to use this max function so that we will clamp our value. And we're going to say shake trauma minus shake decay times delta. And if you're not familiar with delta, that's the amount of time that has passed since the last physics process. Okay, so we're not going to decrease it simply by the shake decay because it's frame dependent. This is time dependent. So we need that delta, that time value, so that it works regardless of frame rate and things like that. And then the max here, well, let's look at how this max works so I can explain it real quick. Returns a maximum of 2 float values. Okay. So, here we go. Returns a maximum of given numeric values. So what we're doing is we're just going to get the highest value. So this is obviously going to be higher than 0 until eventually it's less than 0, at which point it will return 0. And then obviously this only runs while shake trauma is greater than 0. So at some point it's going to stop running this code. Okay, and then here where we say shaky shake, let's just call our shake function and leave it at that. So that's all our physics process needs to do. Okay, pretty simple implementation so far. And so let's finish this off by looking at our shake function. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to calculate how much shake to do each frame, right? I mean, we're calling this each physics process. Okay, so let's start by declaring a variable that's going to be an amount. And technically this is a float. So this is going to be equal to, and we're going to do the power. We're going to use this power function to get a power. We're going to start with our shake trauma. And then we're going to multiply this by our shake, let's see, shake power. Okay, so that shake power, if you recall, is this variable up here. So we can use this shake power just to decrease it. 1 will essentially not decrease it. And if you wanted to be able to put values like 2, you could, and then that would increase it. But you're going to see that we don't want this to get too big or it's going to get out of hand pretty quick. So we're just going to do this to the power of 2. That's going to be our amount. Okay. And then we're going to say offset equals vector 2. Now this offset is the offset of the camera itself. So we're not going to move the camera because our camera is following or stuck to our player, but the offset allows us to adjust the camera's position separately from its actual position, right? So that's why I'm using offset here. So we'll set the offset, and what we're going to do is we want to set our offset to a random value, and then we want to amplify that by the amount. Okay, so the amount could be any number from 0 or greater. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to get our random values here. And so we'll do a random f range of -1 to 1. And we're going to do that on both the x and the y. So we'll just copy and paste that. Okay, so we're going to create a vector 2 for our offset because that's what the offset is. And then we're going to multiply this by shake max offset. Okay, so it's by default, these numbers are going to just be between 1 and -1, and then we'll increase it by the max offset, which by default we have set to 5. Okay, so this could be anywhere from -5 to 5. If you change your max offset to 4, then that would be anywhere from -4 to 4, or, you know, if you set it to 20, you name it. 20 is huge. 5 is already pretty big, in my opinion. And then we're also going to multiply this by the amount that we just calculated, okay? Because obviously we don't want the maximum amount of shake. As this gets closer to 0, our shake is going to decrease. So we need to build some things out before we can test this, but just, I'm going to save this and I'm going to check, I'm going to look at my camera. So when I select it here in the scene, I can see I've got a shake power. I've got my max shake offset, or shake max offset, and the shake decay. Okay, so we've got these values and we can adjust them as we see fit to kind of change how this shake performs. All right. Okay, so the question is how do we trigger this shake effect? And in this project, we have a global script that we're going to use to do this. So if you are kind of following along from scratch, you're going to want to create an equivalent of this. So if we just look at our project, this is a refresher or kind of an introduction if you're new. But if we go over to globals, in our Autoload, we've got this PlayerManager script. Okay, so I'm going to open that, and it's right here in my globals folder. Now this PlayerManager script, the reason why this is such a handy script is because it has access to the player, okay? And it's global, so anything can get access to this. So what we're going to do is within this script, and you can create a new PlayerManager script if you need to. We're going to create a new signal in here. And this signal, we'll call it camera shook. I don't know if there's a better one. And I want this signal to include the trauma, the amount of shake, and that's a float. Okay, so we've got a signal here. And then all we're going to do is just add a new function. We've just got a few functions in here that allow us to do things with the player, but we just need one that we call shake camera. Okay, so any script in the game is going to be able to call this shake camera, and it's going to require a trauma value, which is a float. But we'll set it equal to 1, so technically you could call it without passing that argument. And all this is going to do is it's going to emit the camera shook signal and pass along this trauma value. Okay, so now if we're, say, in our player script and we take damage, we could say, you know, PlayerManager.shake camera, and it's going to emit the signal. So then if we go back to our player camera script, then what we need to do in here is connect to that signal. So here in our ready function, I'm just going to say PlayerManager dot camera shook dot connect. And then we actually already have a function we can use, right? It's this add camera shake function. It accepts that value that we're going to be passing. So just put that in there. And now we're just one step away from actually making this work. Now, in order to test this, I'm going to go to my player script. And in here in the past, we've used this unhandled input and connect to a test action press just to do some things. So I'm actually going to reuse this. I'm going to delete this. We don't need to test our damage. It's the last thing we used it for. Instead, I'm just going to simply call PlayerManager. And I'm going to call this shake camera function. And now if we save this, and if I run the game, I should be able to hit my test key, which is P. And there we go. Got a little camera shake happening. And because it's random, you can see it's not exactly the same every time. And kind of refreshing. Obviously, it's a little bit weird to have a camera shaking without any audio or anything causing it. but now we know it works. And in fact, if we come back over here to our player scene while we're running the game, and I'm just going to come select the camera, and I'm going to change the shake power to 1, for example, and then go back. You can see that's a much larger shake. Okay. And then the max offset, we could change this to 10. I don't know if this is going to make a huge difference just yet, but let's try it. Yeah, even more of a shake. The shake decay, we could change that to a small number like 0.5. And now when we shake, it's going to take a while to slow down. Okay. And we could, you know, decrease that even further. And it's really shaken. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and reset these. And I think for me, I don't want my shake to be too big. I don't want it to interrupt too much. So I'm going to reduce the shake power, but I like the max shake, the max offset just fine. And I'm actually going to increase the decay so that it slows down a little bit quicker. And let's just test this out. Now when I shake, that's a little bit small, but I think that's kind of what I want. I'm not 100% sure. I don't want it to be super overwhelming. I don't want it to disorient the player. So yeah, that's pretty good for just a basic hit. And then when we need to, we can increase it. Okay, so there we go. I've gone ahead and configured the shake power settings how I want them using that simple test. Okay, so actually, as you can see, we're mostly done now. We've proven that we've got a shake on our camera that we can alter and affect, and we've shown how to connect and how to call it. Now we just need to call it in the appropriate places. So obviously here we were looking at our player script and we just have this test, and you can actually comment this out once you don't need it anymore. So let's add this to the appropriate places. Now we've got enemies in our game that take damage, and when the player takes damage, those are both situations in which I think I would want to use this. So let's use that here. I'm going to actually look, since we're on our player, let's just start with the player and let's go to the stun state. And when we enter the stun state, let's just find our enter here. As soon as we get stunned, that means we took damage. So let's just go ahead and call that here. So let's say PlayerManager dot shake camera. And we don't have to pass in a value, but we also could. I'm gonna pass in the hurt box damage value. And that will work pretty well for this game because damage values are always going to be like 1 or maybe 2, but not really huge. If you have a game where, you know, damage continues to increase throughout the game, so you start out doing 10 and eventually you're doing like 1,000,000, you don't want to pass this in here because then if your shake gets bigger based on the amount of damage, that's not going to work. You need to find some way to convert it back down to a small value between, you know, 0 and maybe 2, 3 at max. But 0 to 1 is pretty safe. So I'm going to pass that along. All my enemies currently do 1 damage, but you know, we could increase it for fun. So now if I run this though, is when my player takes damage, the screen should shake. So one of these goblins hit me, it should cause the camera to shake. You know, you don't see it very much when it's kind of at the edge of the screen. Let me see if I can get this guy's attention. There we go. See that? It's taking some damage there. And I'm dead. Okay. So we know that's working. Now that actually kind of adds, this is the game juice, right? It gives that game juice feel, and the shake feels a lot better when it's connected with an action and a sound effect. So let's do this, a similar thing, and I'm going to look at my enemies, and I'm going to open their script folder. And rather than attach this to the enemy state, I'm actually just going to open up this enemy script. All enemies use this, and they all have this take damage function. This way we can shake the screen no matter what state they go to after they take damage, because, you know, these enemies can be configured in different ways. So right here, right after we do the HP minus, I'm just going to say player manager, and then I'm going to say shake camera, and just leave it at 1. Okay, so we'll get just the standard small shake for that. So now when I run it and I attack the enemies and they take damage, should shake the camera. So even with my boomerang, let's try throwing a pot at a guy. I'm not sure I saw the shake there, but I do have the shake kind of minor, so you know we might not be seeing it very well. Let's just play with these slimes. Yeah, that seemed pretty not cool. Let me just go back in here to, I'm going to run this again. And then I'm going to go to my player script, and I'm going to increase the shake power. I think maybe I decreased this too much. Or maybe it's the decay, I don't know. I'm going to save that. Let's just go back over to the game. See what happens. Okay, there we go. Got a little bit of a shake. Let's go fight these slimes. Nice. Feeling okay. And then you can, you can fine tune it. I had fine tuned it to a small amount because I didn't want it to be too much. And clearly that was not strong enough. But that feels pretty good. Okay, so there we go. We've got a simple screen shake. Now in the future, we could start including this in other places. So like if you have a heavy door that slams, then you could have the door script call the PlayerManager.shake camera. You could use this all over the place and get that simple and cheap camera shake feature anytime you need it. And it really does add quite a bit to the gameplay feel. It kind of helps. It helps with the what do I want to call it? Kind of the man, I don't know what I'm thinking, but it feels kind of connects you to the world a little bit when it's like, oh yeah, dang, I just took damage, So there we go. So thanks for following along. Just a quick tutorial. Now I developed this tutorial real quickly to throw it in here because this is kind of one of the steps that I wanted to introduce with my boss video that I'm working on currently. And so there's going to be a couple videos coming out with that. I'm not at the point where I'm recording for the boss fight yet. So, if you want to see that when it comes out, please subscribe to my channel. And if you enjoyed this content, give me a like, comment below. All these things help my channel grow, and I really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.